I want to do a little thinking about end of days and Jesus' second coming. We need to be a little careful as we think about that. Historically, Christians have become really focused and even obsessed with thinking about end of days, predicting the end. And so we want to not be in that space, but it is good for us to think about it. And certainly Jesus taught about it, and the disciples, the New Testament, the whole Bible has references to it. So we do want to think about it. This is one particular point that Jesus talks about it, Matthew 24, when Jesus talks about the end. And he gives us this picture, Matthew 24, verse 6. He says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains." That's a picture Jesus gives, and we see this kind of what seems like an escalation of disasters, natural disasters, man-made disasters. And sometimes Christians throughout history have kind of jumped into looking at the world around us and saying, this is the end. We see this disaster, we see this war, we know it's the end. Looking back, we have seen that those moments weren't the end. And we're seeing a similar thing happen right now with COVID, where Christians are saying this is the end. Certainly there's a disaster happening in our world right now. By the end of 2021, 0.06% of the world's population, more than 5 million people, had died from COVID-19. Now, to put that in perspective, if you add up all the major wars that have happened in the 21st century, Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, and a few more, you get 0.04% of the world's population. More people have died from COVID than from the combined wars. And if we look at those wars and COVID together, we think, well, it looks like this is the end. Certainly the early church thought similar. If we jump to the first generation of Christians and the persecution that happened from Rome, they had great reason to think that. From about 66 AD through to 73 AD, Nero and then a few other emperors, Titus ends up destroying the temple, and 0.18, more than double of the world's population from COVID died in that localized area. We see natural disasters. 500 years later, Ascension Day, earthquake in Antioch. Christians went into Antioch to celebrate Ascension Day, and a massive earthquake hit. 0.13% of the world's population died from the Antioch earthquake. More closer in history, the 1900s, we get the first Great War, World War I, killed 1% of the world's population. Christians said this is the end. On the back of that, 2.5% of the world died from the Spanish flu. In 1939, World War II hit. Hitler was declared the Antichrist. 2.68% of the world died from World War II, and people said this is definitely the end. In the 80s through to now, we have diseases like HIV has claimed 1.29% of the world's population. That's not even counting the big one, which is the Middle Ages. Many famines and wars happened, but in particular, the religious wars in Europe. The popes were declared the Antichrist. There were religious wars that were brutal and claimed 2.76% of the world's population. And of course, the big one in form of natural disaster is in the 1300s, the Black Plague, which they estimate about a third of the world's population died. And of course, Christians were saying, this is the end. And yet we look back on them all and say it wasn't the end. So what are we to make of that? The first thing is that Jesus' point here is not that these things are the signs of the final hour, but these things together are the end. That Jesus is saying from his ascension and the coming of the Holy Spirit till his return, there is going to be a span of time that is the end of days. This is the final hours in Jesus' language. And so it's not to look to the actual day that Jesus is talking about, but to see that this is in entirety the end of days, which leaves us with two things. The first one is Jesus promises that he is coming back, that he will return. And that is the hope of Christianity. And it is a promise, and we cling to that. And so first one is that Jesus is returning. And second one is that the vast majority of the language of the New Testament about that is to live prepared. That doesn't mean bomb shelters or an A-frame on our bodies that says the end is near. When the New Testament talks about living prepared, it's talking about shining the light of Jesus every single day of our lives. That's what it means for Christians to live in the end of days.